Holy injuries! What's going on? I'm Dustin. Welcome to Fantasy Smack Talk. Moving into week 8. So many big names going down this week that we got to talk about. But surprisingly, there's not any really absolute 100% must-adds, but there are a lot of must-adds that I consider in pretty much all leagues. Let's go ahead and I figured I'd just go through all the injuries to start off the show since there's so many of them. The biggest one probably Hightower because he's out for the year. Most of the other injuries just seem to be like 1 to 2 week deals. Hightower out for the year. This makes Hulu and Terrain must-adds I consider in pretty much all leagues. And Hulu, I'm still saying is going to be the guy that is going to be there when it counts the most. Terrain always had injury issues. I'm liking both these guys as ads. Next, McGahee. They're saying he's probably going to miss 1 or 2 weeks. This brings Moreno back on into fantasy relevancy. He was dropped in a lot of leagues. They got Detroit coming up this week. Also, Ball will probably get into the mix a little bit, but Moreno, if McGahee misses time, is going to be the guy. McFadden, if you were a McFadden owner looking for a reason to pick up Michael Bush, here it is. McFadden banged up. They do have their bye week 8, so he might not miss any time, but you need to pick up Bush if he's available. Mark Ingram got a little banged up. Pierre Thomas owners are going to be happy about that with a matchup against St. Louis week 8. We all saw what Murray did to the Rams, so if Pierre Thomas gets a few more touches, could be a nice pickup and play there if he's available. Beanie Wells went down. He's going to be out for probably a couple weeks. This opens the door for Alphonso Smith, only owning about 5% of leagues. He has Baltimore week 8, which isn't exactly that great of a matchup, but if Wells misses 2 games, they have St. Louis week 9. So Smith could be a nice play for week 9 if you grab him. Next, Marshawn Lynch. He's a very hated person in the fantasy land right now. Luckily, I didn't have him starting in any leagues, but such a late scratch. A lot of people just ended up having to eat his 0 points for their fantasy teams. But Leon Washington and Forsett are going to pick up the slack if Lynch misses another week. Out of the two, I like Leon Washington a little bit more. He outperformed Forsett by a good amount week 7, so I think he has a little bit more value if Lynch doesn't play. Percy Harvin, ribs keep acting up on him. This opens the door up for Jenkins to get a few more targets. He had a big game week 7 with the rookie throwing him the ball. Jenkins, never really been a big fan of him, but there's no one else out there, so he does have value moving forward, especially if Harvin stays out. Stafford got banged up. They're saying it's not that serious as of now, but if you absolutely need a quarterback, Hill proved last year that he can play well with Stafford being out, and obviously if you have Calvin Johnson on your team, any quarterback can potentially have value. And the last big injury was Santana Moss. This is going to open up the door for Gaffney and maybe even Anthony Armstrong to get into the mix. Moss is going to be out for 1 to 2 months pretty much. This is not good news for Moss owners. Also, Beck owners, it's not really that good of news for if you're in deeper leagues and you have Beck. Redskins receiving core just got a lot worse. Fred Davis obviously might get a little bit of a boost. All right, a few more must-adds that aren't injury-related, or at least injury-related for week 7, but did you see DeMarco Murray? Brett and I have been high on this guy. He's still only owning 60% of leagues. That's obviously going to change after his performance. So if he's still available, obviously do what you can to pick him up. It's going to be a mess when Felix Jones comes back, but we still like Murray better. We still like Murray more than Felix Jones long term, especially after what he did. Jackie Battle still only owning 50% of leagues. Didn't have an amazing game, but he's definitely the featured back now. So that Chiefs offense has looked a lot better. I know they've been playing some weak defenses, but Battle is going to get the most touches on a decent offense. He needs to be owned in more than 50% of leagues. Moving on, Darius Hayward-Bay. I'm calling him a must-add at this point. He just keeps consistently getting involved in that offense. Raiders have a bye week 8. That should give him enough time to get on the same page with Carson Palmer, and I think that only helps Hayward-Bay. It looks like he might finally be living up to some of that hype. Moving on, let's talk about some guys to add in deeper leagues. The first one, Bernard Scott. He was picked up in a lot of leagues hoping for that Benson suspension, but the suspension was downgraded to only 1 game. So Bernard Scott's only going to get 1 shot, and it's going to be against Seattle. Kind of a tough run D, so I'm not really in love with Scott this week, but if you need a pickup and play, Bernard Scott, not a bad guy to pick up. Moving on, my pickup and play defense of the week is the Bengals. They came off their bye. They were dropped in a lot of leagues, so they're available. They're only owned about 30% of leagues right now. One of the best defenses in the league, top 10 fantasy defense, and they're going up against Seattle, who's had a hard time moving the ball on offense. Moving on, I got another receiver for you, and that's Devon Bess. You know, with Matt Moore at quarterback, Best got a lot more involved this week. 7 catches. That brings him back into fantasy relevance for PPR leagues. Just worth keeping an eye on in some leagues, deeper leagues. I think he's worth a pickup in PPR. All right, we got one IDP player who I think is pretty much a must-add in all IDP leagues, obviously, and that's Mayo. He got dropped in a ton of leagues because of his injury, and he was on a bye last week, but he's coming back. It looks like he's probably going to be ready. He was questionable for week 6, obviously by week 7, so I'm fairly confident he's going to be ready to go week 8. And how often do you get a chance to pick up a guy that's top 5 in their respective position? You need to put in a good waiver for this guy if he's available. And one defensive player to keep your eye on is Javier Arenas for Kansas City. I've talked about this young guy before. Big upside, handles all the return duties for the Chiefs. Not going to get you a ton of tackles, but a surprising turn of events on week 7. He had a rush and he got into the end zone. So that's definitely something to be very conscious of, because if they do continue to involve him in the offense, that's just going to be nice bonus points for you. Now, this is just a portion of the week 8 waiver wire. Get onto the site to see the full list. A lot to go over this week, a ton of injuries. Good luck on the waiver wire. Brent and I will see you later this week.